bird's nests tangling on the underside of the work as you start to sew. What can you do to minimize that really frustrating thing that happens? Let me help. A lot of the sewing that we are doing as quilters is straight stitch, and when I'm doing straight stitch sewing I use a straight stitch plate. This is my regular stitch plate and this is the straight stitch plate, and the difference between those two is the hole that the needle goes down into. So the regular stitch plate has this long oval shaped hole that you need to have if you're doing zigzag buttonholes, decorative embroidery stitches, but the straight stitch plate just has a small round hole. So you can visualize that when you actually take the first stitch, the work isn't kind of pushed down into that hole, it's held a little bit more taut when you use the straight stitch plate, and I feel that the fact that it's held more firmly and not pushed down means the starting off of the sewing is just a little bit better, and it really helps to reduce the bird's nest. Now, I rarely use the scissor function that I have on my sewing machine. The scissor function is a little button that I press at the end of every line of stitching, and it cuts the top and bottom thread. And I find that I get more snarling and more problems, and also kind of not being able to start stitching because the thing hasn't got enough thread to get hold of. And when I have more problems when I use the scissor function than when I don't, okay? And so I like to have a long tail top and bottom at the start of a line of stitching. So I'll have that long tail top and bottom, and what I do is I hold onto those thread tails as I start to sew, but I do more than that. What I do is I use my knee lift, which lifts and lowers the presser foot. So I use my knee lift to lift the presser foot. I position the work where I want it to be, and then I put the needle down, and I can do that on my sewing machine in a variety of ways, but the easiest way is to turn the balance wheel. Now put the needle down into the work, and I put it as far down as it will go. I then put the presser foot down, and then hold on to the thread tails. This sounds like a lot of things to do, but you just do it automatically, it takes no time at all, and I start to sew. And I feel that having the longest length of thread going through the sewing machine with the needle down means that as the sewing machine starts to sew, it's not having to take up any thread, and it can just do what it wants to do, and the holding of the thread just makes sure that it doesn't snarl. Whereas if you just kind of plonk your work under the sewing machine foot, you don't put the needle down, you just press the presser foot, and maybe you start to sew at a bit of speed, kind of grabs the thread, and it gives the opportunity for too much thread to come off or not quite the right amount and do that chewing, okay? So taking the time to just set everything up correctly and then just smoothly start sewing really helps to eliminate those bird's nest. But there is one more thing that I find very useful, and that is a leader strip, and I will make a little double folded strip of the same fabric that I'm actually sewing with. So you know, that's cotton of course if I'm doing quilting, but if I was making a chunky woolen coat I would be doing the same thing. And at the end of every line of stitching I feed this through and I stitch about just to the end, so all of the foot is on this double folded piece of fabric, and then when I come to start the next line of stitching, the next piece that I'm sewing, I can just feed it in. The thread is already anchored and held in place. The thickness of these two layers means that the foot is slightly lifted, so the next piece will go in, and there's just no possibility of the thread snarling because they are held by that last little bit of stitching that you have got in your leader strip. I do also think that the foot that you are using can make a difference, and make sure that you are choosing the correct foot for the particular job that you are doing. So again, let's talk about regular straight stitch. Let me give you an example. I'm teaching in a classroom situation. We've been doing satin stitch. We've had a satin stitch foot on, which has a really wide opening to allow for that throw from the left of the right to the right. And then we're going to change what we're doing, and we're going to do some straight stitch. And a student might decide, oh, well, it's not, I'm only going to do a bit, it's not worth changing the foot. It absolutely is worth changing the foot, because you can see that with the foot that is designed for straight stitch, the work is going to be held really securely. There's going to be less play, less pushing down into the actual body of the machine as you sew, if you have the correct foot on. So that's a huge satin stitch foot, but I'm just going to talk about the kind of universal foot, the foot that your sewing machine manufacturer thinks that you will use for regular straight stitch. It's not an open toe, so it's not easy to see, and it has a wide hole to allow for zigzag. That is going to do that pushing, that flagging thing that I spoke about earlier. I like to use my 1/4 inch foot for regular straight stitch. I think it really helps with accuracy and reducing bird's nest. It holds the work securely, it's got really good visibility to the needle point, and it's just got that small opening so the work doesn't get pushed down. So go to the trouble of changing the foot so that you are using the correct foot for the job. And I feel that if you do all of those little things that I've said, your frustration with bird's nest will be much reduced, and your stitching will be more accurate, and you'll be much prouder of the results that you are achieving.